Groaning from the Soul. Arm in arm, we cautiously yet rhythmically make our way over the uneven cobblestones toward the memorial at Treblinka. To steady Jerry, I grasp his left arm tightly. His daughter-in-law, Joanna, does the same with his right. 3 of Jerry's grandchildren and our guide traverse the path ahead of us. Jerry, Joanna, and I slowly follow the trail bordered by large egg-shaped stones symbolizing the barbed-wired boundaries of the camp. We walk alongside the row of railroad ties carved of concrete representing the path of the old railroad tracks. Momentarily, I conjure the image of the trains arriving there during the Holocaust and of the people's terror as they were herded down the road to heaven to their fates at this death camp, the men shoved to the right and the women and children to the left. To be showered and deloused, they were told. From the exhibits at the small museum we visited and the history I have read, I know that approximately 800,000 people died in Treblinka, almost all immediately upon arrival. I visualized the crowds getting off at the fake train station with the fake clock and fake ticket window casting a last ray of hope. How much worse could this be than the long journey in a crowded boxcar with dehydrated and emaciated people defecating and dying during the trip? They soon would find out. I wonder if Jerry and Joanna are thinking similar thoughts as we walk quietly toward the monument. The silence feels overwhelming, and a sense of tragedy permeates the air. A slight wind blows and birds chirp, but I quickly block them out, pushing away any semblance of peacefulness that threatens to permeate the edge of this dense forest on a summer day. The atmosphere and the slow, steady pace remind me of the many times I have walked the hill to the burial site in my hometown, where my mother, father, brother, and aunt are laid to rest. Oh, how I miss them at this moment. I wonder, is there any rest here? I can feel Jerry's tenseness, apprehension, and sadness through my arm linked with his, and I am aware of and share his desire and reluctance to approach the towering monument up ahead. Please may he find here some sense of what he is looking for, be it peace, connection, or release of grief. He may have no idea of what to hope for. I know I don't. I am just glad to be here with him on this journey. Though I think of videotaping, my camera hangs by my side. After quickly filming the entryway, I intuit that it is disrespectful to turn it on, to record this emotional, spiritual, and sacred experience. After 10 minutes, we see ahead the garden of approximately 17,000 multi-shaped and multicolored rocks, ranging from the size of a hand to a large tombstone. I take a deep breath and imagine the piles of burning bodies in the mass graves. I imagine the women waiting in line, naked, their heads shaven, holding their babies close to their chests as long as they can, while the men are gassed first, their moans and screams shattering any remnant of hope. 15 to 20 minutes is all it took. Did it seem a lifetime or a quick moment to them? Maybe both. I imagine the women and children now herded into the gas chambers after the men were shoveled out in heaps on the other side, some still gasping. I imagine the children, the ones who had not already been flung against walls, their brains splattering, tossed in on top of the women, who were made to stand with their hands in the air to make room for more bodies. I don't fully understand why, but I must make myself imagine the horror, though I know, and I am glad that I really cannot. We talk quietly as we walk, commenting on what we see in front of us. Jerry stops several times to blow his nose. I feel like I'm finally able to pay my respects, he says, to come to their grave. If only there was a marker. Maybe we can find the Badzitten stone, I say, remembering that 130 markers are engraved with the names of the towns of the victims. Badzitten is the location of the small ghetto from which Jerry's mother and younger sister were taken. Delineating the extermination camp, the symbolic gravestones spread out in a circular formation in front of us as far as the eye can see. I fear I have raised Jerry's hopes in vain. Still, it's worth a try. If the stone is here, I'm determined to find it. As we enter the garden, I begin scanning the jagged rocks. Quickly, I see what appears to be Badzitten imprinted in large letters on a 4-foot-high marker. Could that be? Come this way, I say to Jerry. I think I see Badzitten. What? Asked Jerry, cupping his ear. Then, stay here a moment, I motion, fearing I am wrong and not wanting him to make the trek for nothing. I quickly approach the stone, and I see that, yes, Badzitten is engraved on its front. I found the Badzitten marker, I say to Jerry and Joanna when I return. Really? Jerry says. His face lights up for a moment before the tears start to fall. Where? Over there. Jerry walks in the direction I point, and Joanna and I rush to hold on to him. Badzitten, there it is, Joanna says as we approach the rock. She and I support Jerry until he can lean on the tombstone-shaped marker. He begins to weep, and we begin to cry quietly as he hangs his head over the stone and touches it reverently. We take turns gently rubbing his back to let him know we are there, then move away to give him a sense of privacy. Continuing to weep, Jerry lovingly traces each of the engraved letters with the tips of his fingers. His grandson, a brother in the Catholic Church, approaches and prays aloud with him. I note the small pebbles that visitors have left on top of the marker, signifying permanence and a reminder to all who arrive that others have been here as well, and that we are connected and continue through memory. Our guide from Warsaw stands apart watching the scene. I think of our drive here and how the guide's commentary was halted when Jerry said his mother and sister had died in Treblinka. The guide turned to Jerry then and began asking him questions. If he had not identified Jerry as a mourning survivor, he likely would be talking to us now, describing what we are seeing as though we were tourists. Instead, he gives us time to grieve on our own. He acknowledges the sacredness of our being there, that it is an event in need of no words. From a respectful distance, the guide takes a video of Jerry at the stone. Joanna also steps back and snaps a few iPad photos of Jerry. With that, I feel I have permission to record the scene, though I too move away and film Jerry for only a short time. Listening to the video later, I hear weeping and sniffling, and it takes a while to recognize the sounds as mine. Even as I write this, I sigh and feel deep sadness, which I experience as a heaviness in my body, an emptiness in my stomach, and tightness in my chest. Jerry turns away from the marker and signifies with a nod that he is ready to go. Finally, I have been able to grieve, he says. Before, I didn't have a place to come to. No cemetery, nothing. Joanna and I link to his arms again, and we wander with no purpose around the cemetery, commenting on the names of the stones. We walk toward the tall monument in the center of the garden. Standing at the site of the former gas chamber, the granite tower is shaped like a tall tombstone with a crack down the middle and capped by a mushroom-shaped block covered with carvings of a menorah and Jewish symbols. Without a word, we then turn back, foregoing a visit to the pits of mass graves, the sunken sculpture that marks the site where the bodies were burned, and the labor camp section of Treblinka. We start the long trek back to the car along the same railroad tracks that brought Jerry's mother and sister to their deaths. Jerry will say later, the railroad tracks were the hardest part, as I imagine my mother and sister arriving in the boxcar. The death itself, he will add, was swift, At least I hope it was. And I hope they already had lost their minds from shock, so they did not know what was happening. When Jerry sighs with relief, I consider turning on the video camera. But that would be intrusive, I think, and might interrupt the solemn and contemplative mood. Besides, I can't point the camera toward him and continue holding his arm. It is most important to be with Jerry, to support and feel with him. I am honored that he invited me to be part of this experience. It seems irreverent to risk making a spectacle out of his grief. I know now that my decision to forego bringing a film crew on this part of our trip together was the right one. We walk a ways in silence. Still, wanting to have a record of this moment, I think that perhaps Jerry and his family might want one as well. I turn on my palm-sized video camera and continue walking with it pointed toward our feet to unobtrusively record the sounds of our steps and our words. After a while, we began to talk about suffering, ongoing genocide, relief from grief through death, and Treblinka as a memorial. When Jerry says he wishes he could pray better, Joanna replies that prayer is groaning from the soul. It's not the words that matter. When I left Bodzentin, I knew I would never see them again, Jerry says, a moan escaping from deep in his throat. I feel close to them now, being here. They must be smiling, I say. What? Asked Jerry. Your mother and sister, to have you here with your daughter-in-law, your wonderful grandchildren. It signifies that their deaths were not in vain. You survived. You survived, I repeat with emphasis on you. And through you, their memories live on. Jerry nods. Then, do you hear the birds? I asked Jerry, suddenly becoming aware of the chirping. He says, yes. Their song is beautiful, I say, and he agrees. We walk and listen quietly to the serenade.
The tall ones is barbed wire.